So, you talk flood irrigation. That's something I know a lot about, having worked a couple seasons throwing tubes on the irrigation ditches. And the question there was always a matter of efficiency. I'll never forget getting yelled at by one of my farmers who could do the calculation in his head on how much acre feet he is going to have to overpay.
Got it.
How do you, can you give us an idea, what does that water efficiency look like in your operation? Because I would imagine you're still subject to controls.
Correct.
In terms of what you can bring from the aquifers, and yet at the same time, you're really basing a business on the use of that water. What can you tell us about that efficiency and how you need to, well, you need to make that pay for your business?
Mm-hmm. Well, the irrigation booms themselves, as I mentioned, it's a smart controller, so there's no overspray. So if you're on a farm with a pivot, sometimes they're overspray and they're getting out in the field instead of hitting their alfalfa, right? And it's just a waste of water. With the irrigation booms, it's within an inch or two of where it's going to water, so there's very little wasted water that way. On the ecosystem, it doesn't water unless there's a pot beneath it, so there's zero wasted water on that system itself. And then with the ebb and flood floors, we have concrete barriers along each side of the bays that run up and down, and then at the fronts of the bays we have a rubber dam. So when we flood the floors with water, there's zero waste at all. So it takes about 10 to 15 minutes to flood the bay in about 4 inches of water. And when we poured the concrete on each bays, we sloped everything at about a 2 or 3% grade. So all the water that the plants don't suck up runs back into my maze of PVC piping and goes into our reclamation pits that we then can continue to treat the water and reuse.
Give us an idea. So you just mentioned the reuse of that water. How much of the water are you reusing versus how much you're actually pulling from the aquifer? Do you have an idea on what that looks like?
Well, with the bay system set up and the piping underneath our greenhouses, all of the water that the plants don't use gets recaptured. So we can recycle, I say 98%. It's never 100% efficient, but we can recapture 98% of the water that we're putting on plants that they're not taking up to consume themselves. Then we can continue to retreat it, add the nutrients that it needs to, and continue to pump it out into the greenhouse for ebb and flood tanks, or put it into our water hole and silo tanks, and then they can water again through our irrigation booms or ecosystems. So our big goal here is, water is a huge thing in Colorado, as you've mentioned, and we want to make the best use of what we're using at all times, so we're not wasting anything.